Hi there, and welcome to our webinar on migration considerations and the AWS WellArchitected review. My name is Warwick Levy, and I'm the VP of Marketing at Silicon Overdrive. Silicon Overdrive is an AWS advanced consulting partner, channel reseller, and public sector partner. We are also AWS WellArchitected partners and AWS EC2 for Windows workload service delivery partners. The primary objective of this webinar is to give people looking to migrate to the cloud some more info about their cloud adoption journey, and to talk about how an AWS WellArchitected review can help you ensure that new and existing environments are up to AWS best practice. In the first half of the webinar, we're going to look at the primary factors to consider before migrating to the cloud to better prepare you for your pre-migration. After that, we'll move on to the AWS WellArchitected review, a framework that has been specifically designed to ensure that your AWS environment is cost-optimized, efficient, and secure. By participating in a WA, or WellArchitected review, you can find and eliminate any elements of your cloud architecture that don't measure up to best practices. And to round off the morning, we're going to look at funding options available to you through AWS and Silicon Overdrive. When it comes to cloud migrations, we see a number of different business drivers. First is increasing business agility. Companies are creating business cases where they believe their workforce can be 30 to 70% more productive and deliver features much faster as a result of migrating their skills and applications to the cloud. Data center consolidation projects are common, especially in companies that have been active with acquisitions or that have experienced infrastructure sprawl over the years. Thanks to the advances of the cloud and buzzwords like the Fourth Industrial Revolution, there is also an increase in companies looking to completely reimagine their business using modern technology as part of larger digital transformation projects and innovation. And, of course, any cost-conscious organization is always looking for ways to improve the bottom line by reducing their costs. And while there are lots of reasons enterprises are motivated to migrate their legacy systems to the cloud, oftentimes comprising tens of thousands of servers or dozens of data centers, they're also asking questions about how they can do it quickly. When it comes to migrating to the cloud, there are some potential barriers to consider. Things like existing investments, skeptical stakeholders, upfront expenses, application interdependencies, concerns of downtimes during the migration, and a lack of cloud expertise. To overcome any potential barriers, we suggest a three-prong approach to your cloud adoption journey. The first prong is your business case. This is where we define business drivers and develop a compelling investment justification. Justifications include things like being able to achieve a faster time to market, being able to improve the overall workforce productivity, and to gain additional transparency into operational costs. The second prong is your people and organization. This is where you identify new roles and responsibilities for during and after the migration. Consider who in your workforce will fill the identified roles. Estimate how the workforce will be impacted by cloud adoption, and always remember that executive leadership and guidance will foster organization-wide buy-in, so it's very important that you get the higher-ups in your company to really understand and buy into the cloud. And the third prong is a methodological migration process. A little later on, I'm going to discuss the 5-step migration process. Use this process to visualize and plan your cloud adoption from business planning and portfolio evaluation to application design and migration execution to cloud operations. You can forecast the amount of time and effort required to complete each step of the migration process, gain a deeper understanding of how to optimize operations on AWS. And remember, you don't have to do this alone. Silicon Overdrive is here to assist you in laying the foundation for your cloud adoption. Let's take a closer look at each of these three prongs for your cloud adoption journey, starting with building a business case for AWS migration. When building a business case, it's important that you take a data-driven rationale for your cloud adoption. So start with the cost analysis. where you compare potential AWS run costs with your current operating model. And look at and investigate AWS purchasing and pricing options. Next, look at the cost of change. Factor in the consulting costs of your migration planning, and remember to look at the cost of maintaining your legacy equipment until the migration is complete. After that, we look at labor productivity, where we estimate the reduction in the number of maintenance hours that using AWS managed services will provide, as well as the productivity gains your team will achieve from automation. Lastly, when building the business case, we look at the business value. To do this, we estimate the expected return of investment, or ROI, and we take into account faster deployment times and scalabilities, while also looking at the reductions from decommissioned assets. The second prong is the people and organization. As I mentioned earlier, an engaged leadership team helps to make a convincing case for migrating to AWS. The first step is to form a Cloud Center of Excellence, or a CCOE, to establish operational processes and mobilize the appropriate resources. You should include people from all across the business segments in your company, not just your techs. Everyone from HR and sales to accounts and engineers should be involved in your journey to cloud adoption. Next, you're going to want to define best practices and governance standards and automate discovery to drive change. CCOE members will develop subject matter expertise as the migration effort evolves. And the better they understand cloud and the better their expertise become, they'll be able to help gain buy-in from the entire workforce. One of the tools we use to plan your migration and get the people in your organization ready to migrate to the cloud is the AWS Cloud Adoption Framework, or CAF. The AWS CAF Action Plan helps you prepare for the transition to cloud-based IT. The journey begins with your leadership team reviewing the 6 CAF perspectives. Each perspective is used to create work streams that uncover gaps in your existing skills and processes, which are recorded as inputs. These inputs are the basis for creating an AWS CAF action plan to guide your organization's change management as you journey to the cloud. There are 3 business perspectives, the blocks in blue, and 3 technical perspectives that we look at. Let's first look at the business perspectives. The business perspective helps you move from separate strategies for business and IT to a business model that integrates IT strategy. Agile IT strategies are aligned to support your business outcomes, and they can adjust to business needs or technical capabilities as they change. Common roles are business managers, finance managers, budget owners, and strategy stakeholders. And their capabilities should include things like IT finance, which addresses your capacity to plan, allocate, and manage the budget for IT expenses with the use-based cost model of cloud services. IT strategy helps you take advantage of cloud-based IT approach to deliver value and end-user adoption. Benefits realization helps you measure the benefits of your IT investments using methods for a cloud-based IT operating model. And business risk management helps you estimate the potential business impact of preventable, strategic, and/or external risks. Then we have the people perspective. The people perspective helps human resources and personnel management prepare their teams for cloud adoption by updating staff skills and organizational processes to include cloud-based competencies. Common roles for the people perspective is human resources, staffing, and people managers. As for capabilities, resource management helps you understand and forecast new personnel needs for a cloud-based model. Incentive management helps you implement a compensation program that will attract and retain the personnel required to operate a cloud-based IT model. Career management helps you identify, acquire, and retain the skills needed for your cloud migration and ongoing operating model. Training management provides guidance on how to develop or acquire training for your employees so they can perform their roles in a cloud-based environment. And organizational change management helps you manage the impact of business, structural and cultural changes caused by cloud adoption. And then we have the governance perspective. The governance perspective integrates IT governance and organizational governance. It provides guidance on identifying and implementing best practices for IT governance and on supporting business processes with technology. Common roles here are your CIO, your program managers, project managers, enterprise architects, business analysts, and portfolio managers. As far as capabilities are concerned, portfolio management provides a mechanism to manage IT based on desired business outcomes. It can help to determine cloud eligibility for workloads when prioritizing which services to move to the cloud. Program and project management helps you manage technology projects using methodologies that take advantage of the agility and cost management benefits inherent to cloud services. Business performance measurement helps you measure the impact of the cloud on business objectives. And license management defines methods to procure, distribute, and manage the licenses needed for IT systems, services, and software. From there, we move on to the three technical perspectives, or the blocks in orange. First is the platform perspective. The platform perspective helps you design, implement, and optimize the architecture of AWS technology based on business goals and objectives. It helps provide strategic guidance for the design principles, tools, and policies you will use to define the AWS infrastructure. The platform perspective also includes principles and patterns for communicating your target state environment, implementing new solutions on the cloud, and migrating on-premise workloads to the clouds. Common roles here are your CTO, your IT managers, and your solutions architects. As for capabilities, systems and solutions architecture helps you define and describe the system design and your architectural standards. Compute, network storage, and database provisioning helps you develop new processes for provisioning infrastructure in a cloud environment. Provisioning shifts from an operational focus aligning supply with demand to an architectural focus aligning services with requirements. Application development addresses your ability to support business goals with new or updated applications and helps implement new skills and processes for software development that take advantage of the agility gained by cloud computing. Next, we have the security perspective. The security perspective helps you structure the selection and implementation of controls. Following this guidance can make it easier to identify areas of non-compliance and plan ongoing security incentives. Common roles here are your CISO, your IT security managers, and your IT security analysts. They should be able to identify and access management. The capabilities here include identity and access management, or IAM, which helps you integrate AWS into your identity management lifecycle and sources of authentication and authorization. Detective control provides guidance to help identify potential security incidents within your AWS environment. Infrastructure security helps you implement control methodologies necessary to comply with best practices, as well as meet industry or regulatory obligations. Data protection helps you to implement appropriate safeguards that protect data in transit and at rest, and incident response helps you define and execute a response to security incidents. The final of the technical perspectives is the operations perspective. The operation perspective helps you run, use, operate, and recover IT workloads to levels that meet the requirements of your business stakeholders. Insights gained through the operations perspective define your current operating procedures, as well as process changes and training needed for successful cloud adoption. Well-managed IT operations support the operations of the business from planning and sustaining through change and incident management. Common roles include IT operations managers and IT support managers. And for capabilities, we're looking at service monitoring, which focuses on detecting and responding to IT operations, health indicators to meet your service level agreements and operating level agreements. We also look at application performance monitoring, or APM, which provides you with new approaches for monitoring application performance in a cloud environment to ensure that application health meets defined requirements. Resource inventory management helps you manage virtual IT assets to provide services that are both high-performing and cost-efficient. Release and change management helps your teams adopt software development best practices such as automation and continuous integration and continuous delivery, or CI/CD for those DevOps people out there, increasing the pace of your innovations. And reporting and analytics helps you monitor the health of cloud assets and provides insights to help you reach the desired level of performance. Business continuity and disaster recovery helps you implement processes to keep your business running during a catastrophic event. And finally, we look at IT Service Catalog to help you offer cloud services to the business using a model that can help to improve the efficiency of providing IT services as well as the productivity of consuming them. The final prong that we're going to look at is the methodological migration process. So, during phase 1, we look at migration preparation and business planning. This is where we take business objectives into account, along with the age and architecture of your existing applications and their constraints. We're looking for an engaged leadership with frequent communication and clarity of purpose. And it's important that we set aggressive but realistic goals and timelines that make it easier for an entire organization to rally behind the decision to migrate. During phase 2, we move to portfolio discovery and planning. A full portfolio analysis of your environment, complete with a map of interdependencies, as well as migration strategies and priorities, are key elements to building a successful migration plan. Beginning the migration project with less critical and complex applications in your portfolio creates a sound learning opportunity for your migration teams. This brings us to phase 3, which is application design, as well as phase 4, which is migration and validation. The focus shifts from the portfolio level to the individual and application level, and each application is designed, migrated, and validated. A continuous improvement approach is recommended because the level of project fluidity and success comes down to how well you apply and iterate the methodology used in these phases. Phase 5 is the modern operating model. Your cloud operating model is an evergreen set of people, processes, and technologies. This constantly improves as you migrate more applications, optimize your new foundation, turn off old systems, and constantly iterate. Building off the expertise developed from the previous migration of application enables you to develop a foundation that leads to a continually improving operating model. What we want to look at now is 6 common migration strategies that people would employ when moving to the cloud. The most common is a rehost, also known as a lift and shift. This can be automated with tools such as AWS Server Migration Service, although you may prefer to do this manually as you learn to apply your legacy systems to the new cloud platform. A rehost or lift and shift is literally just moving what you have on-prem to what you have in the cloud. Next is a re-platform. This is a lift, tinker, and shift. In other words, we don't just move what's on-prem to the cloud, we tweak it a little bit to optimize it for the cloud. So making a few cloud optimizations in order to achieve some tangible benefit without changing the core architecture of the application. So for example, reducing the amount of time spent managing the database instances that are migrated to Amazon Relational Database Service. The third migration strategy is to repurchase. This is where we move to a newer version or different solution. It likely means your organization is willing to change the existing licensing model it has been using, which is worth considering for workloads that can be easily upgraded to newer versions. Next is we have the refactor, or a re-architect. This is driven by strong business need to add features, scale, or improve performance that would otherwise be difficult to achieve in the application's existing environment. This basically entails overhauling legacy applications for optimization once they are on AWS. Next is retain. Retain is when you only migrate what makes sense for the business, and if there are portions of your IT portfolio that are not ready to migrate, or you do not have an application that was recently upgraded, meaning additional charges would have to be made once it's shifted to AWS. And the final migration strategy is to retire. This is where we identify IT assets that are no longer useful and can be turned off, meaning your workforce can focus on maintaining the resources that are widely used. Fortunately, when it comes to migrations, you're not alone. APN partners like Silicon Overdrive, AWS Professional Services, and other solutions are available on the AWS Marketplace which can help. They can help you to determine your migration strategy and also develop a contingency plan. We can create a clear roadmap to help you achieve your desired end state on the cloud. We can visualize the entire migration effort timeline and reduce cost and risk. And we can help keep your workforce focused on business innovation and change management. Now that we've looked at migration considerations, let's move on to the AWS WellArchitected Review Framework. The AWS WellArchitected Framework is based on 5 pillars and helps you understand the pros and cons of decisions you make while building systems on AWS. By using the framework, you will learn architectural best practices for designing and operating reliable, secure, efficient, and cost-effective systems in the cloud. It provides a way for you to continuously measure your architecture against best practices and identify areas for improvement. The process for reviewing an architecture is a constructive conversation between you and the Silicon Overdrive WellArchitected Review team of AWS engineers about architectural designs, and is not an audit mechanism. We believe that having well-architected systems greatly increases the likelihood of business success. The AWS WellArchitected Review Framework identifies a set of general design principles to facilitate good design in the cloud, which will allow you to stop guessing your capacity needs, test systems at production scale, automate to make architectural experimentation easier, allows for evolutionary architectures, drives architectures using data, and you can improve your architectures through game days. The WellArchitected Review workflow follows 3 steps. First is the WA Security Workshop, where we meet with key stakeholders in the business and technology. From there, we move to data collection and analysis. So cloud data analysis measured on design principles and best practices. And finally, we move to the assessment, review, and action plan, which is where an assessment presentation and report delivery and remediation roadmap review. Let's look at the specific pillars of the WellArchitected Review. The first pillar we're going to look at is the reliability pillar, which focuses on the ability to prevent and quickly recover from failures to meet business and customer demand. Key topics include foundational elements around setup, cross-project requirements, recovery planning, and how we handle change. When it comes to reliability design principles, we first test recovery procedures. In an on-premise environment, testing is often conducted to prove the system works in a particular scenario. Testing is not typically used to validate recovery strategies. In the cloud, you can test how your system fails and you can validate your recovery procedures. You can use automation to simulate different failures or to recreate scenarios that led to failures before. This exposes failure pathways that you can test and rectify before a real failure scenario, reducing the risk of components failing that have not been tested before. You can also automatically recover from failure. By monitoring a system for key performance indicators, you can trigger automation when a threshold is breached. This allows for automatic notification and tracking of failures, and for automated recovery processes that work around or repair the failure. With more sophisticated automation, it's possible to anticipate and remediate failures before they occur. Scale horizontally to increase aggregate system availability. Replace one large resource with multiple small resources to reduce the impact of a single failure on the overall system. Distribute requests across multiple smaller resources to ensure they don't share a common point of failure. Stop guessing capacity. A common cause of failure in on-premise systems is resource saturation, when the demands placed on a system exceed the capacity of that system. This is often the objective of denial of service attacks or DDoS attacks. In the cloud, you can monitor demand and system utilization and automate the addition or removal of resources to maintain the optimum level to satisfy demand without over or under provisioning. And the final reliability design principle is to manage change and automation. Changes to your infrastructure should be done using automation. The changes that need to be managed are then changes to the automation. As we said, the WellArchitected Framework is a set of questions that we ask you to determine your readiness or your score for each pillar. So in reliability, we'll ask you questions like, how do you manage service limits? How do you manage your network topology? How does your system adapt to changes in demand? How do you monitor your resources? How do you implement changes? How do you back up data? How does your system withstand component failures? How do you test for resilience? And how do you plan for disaster recovery? The next pillar we're going to look at is the security pillar, which focuses on protecting information and systems. Key topics include confidentiality and integrity of data, identifying and managing who can do what with privilege management, protecting systems, and establishing controls to detect security events. When it comes to security design principles, the first design principle we look at is to implement a strong identity foundation. This is where you implement the principle of least privilege and enforce separation of duties with appropriate authorization for each interaction with your AWS resources. You can centralize privilege management and reduce or even eliminate reliance on long-term credentials. Enable traceability. This is where you can monitor, alert, and audit actions and changes to your environment in real time. Integrate logs and metrics with systems to automatically respond and take action. Next is to apply security at all layers. Rather than focusing on protection of a single outer layer, apply a defense in-depth approach with other security controls. Apply to all layers, example your network edge, your VPC, your subnets, your load balancers, and so on. Automate security best practices. Automated software-based security mechanisms improve your ability to securely scale more rapidly and cost-effectively. Create secure architectures, including the implementation of controls that are defined and managed as code and version control templates. Protect data in transit and at rest. This is where you classify your data into sensitivity levels and use mechanisms such as encryption, tokenization, and access control where appropriate. Keep people away from data. Create mechanisms and tools to reduce or eliminate the need for direct access or manual processing of data. This reduces the risk of loss or modification and human error when handling sensitive data. And finally, we look at prepare for security events. Prepare for an incident by having an incident management process that aligns to your organizational requirements. Run incident response simulations and use tools with automation to increase your speed for detection, investigation, and recovery. The questions we'll ask you around the security pillar include: how do you manage credentials and authentication? How do you control human access? How do you control programmatic access or detect and investigate security events? How do you defend against emergent security threats, and how do you protect your network? How do you protect your compute resources and classify your data? How do you protect your data at rest or in transit? And how do you respond to an incident? Next pillar is the performance efficiency pillar, which focuses on using IT and computing resources effectively. Key topics include selecting the right resource types and sizes based on workload requirements, monitoring performance, and making informed decisions to maintain efficiency as business needs evolve. The design principles around performance and efficiency include to democratize advanced technologies. Technologies are difficult to implement can become easier to consume by pushing all that knowledge and complexity into the cloud vendor's domain. Rather than having your IT team learn how to host and run a new technology, they can simply consume it as a service. For example, NoSQL databases, media transcoding, and machine learning are all technologies that require expertise that is not evenly dispersed across the technical community. In the cloud, these technologies become services that your team can consume while focusing on product development rather than resource provisioning and management. You can go global in minutes. You can easily deploy your system in multiple regions around the world with just a few clicks. This allows you to provide lower latency and better experience for your customers at minimal cost. You can use serverless architectures. In the cloud, serverless architectures remove the need for you to run and maintain servers to carry out traditional compute activities. For example, storage services can act as static websites, removing the need for web servers, and event services can host your code for you. This not only removes the operational burden of managing these servers, but can also lower the transactional costs because these managed services operate at cloud scale. You can experiment more often. With virtual and automated resources, you can quickly carry out comparative testing using different types of instances, storage, or configurations. Mechanical sympathy. Use the technology approach that aligns best to what you are trying to achieve. For example, consider data access patterns when selecting database or storage approaches. The questions we're going to ask around the performance efficiency include: how do you select the best performing architecture? How do you select your compute solution or storage solution? How do you select your database? How do you configure your networking solution? How do you evolve your workload to take advantage of new releases? How do you monitor your resources to ensure they are performing as expected? And how do you use trade-offs to improve performance? The fourth pillar is the cost optimization pillar, which focuses on avoiding unneeded costs. Key topics include understanding and controlling where money is being spent, selecting the most appropriate and right number of resource types, analyzing spend over time, and scaling to meet business needs without overspending. The design principles here include adopting a cloud consumption model. Pay only for the computing resources that you require and increase or decrease usage depending on business requirements, not by using elaborate forecasting. For example, development and testing environments are typically only used for 8 hours a day during the work week. You can stop these resources when they're not in use for potential cost savings of 75%. In other words, 40 hours a week versus 68 hours if it was on full time. You can measure your overall efficiency. This is where we measure the business output of the workload and the costs associated with delivering it. Use this measure to know the gains you make from increasing output and reducing costs. Stop spending money on data center operations. AWS does the heavy lifting of racking, stacking, and powering servers, so you can focus on your customers and organization projects rather than the underlying IT infrastructure. Analyze and attribute expenditure. The cloud makes it easier to accurately identify the usage and cost of systems, which then allows transparent attribution of IT costs to individual workload owners. This helps measure return on investment and gives workload owners an opportunity to optimize their resources and reduce costs. And use managed application level services to reduce cost of ownership. In the cloud, managed and application level services remove the operational burden of maintaining servers for tasks such as sending email or managing databases. As managed services operate at cloud scale, they can offer a lower cost per transactional service. Some of the questions we're going to ask around cost optimization include: do you govern usage? How do you monitor usage and cost? How do you decommission resources? How do you evaluate cost when you select services? How do you meet cost targets when you select resource types and size? How do you use pricing models to reduce costs or plan for data transfer changes? How do you match supply of resources with demand? And how do you evaluate new services? The final pillar is the operational excellence pillar, which focuses on running and monitoring systems to deliver business value and continually improving processes and procedures. Key topics include managing and automating changes, responding to events, and defining standards to successfully manage daily operations. The design principles around the operational excellence pillar include perform operations as code. In the cloud, you can apply the same engineering discipline that you use for application code to your entire environment. You can define your entire workload, applications, and infrastructure as a code and update it with code. You can implement your operation procedures as code and automate their execution by triggering them in response to events. By performing operations as code, you limit human error and enable consistent responses to events. Annotate documentation. In an on-premise environment, documentation is created by hand, used by people, and hard to keep in sync with the pace of change. In the cloud, you can automate the creation of annotated documentation after every build, or automatically annotate handcrafted documentation. Annotated documentation can be used by people and systems. Next is to make frequent, small, reversible changes. Design workloads to allow components to be updated regularly. Make changes in small increments that can be reversed if they fail, without affecting the customers when possible. Refine operation procedures frequently. As you use operation procedures, look for opportunities to improve them. As you evolve your workload, evolve your procedures appropriately. Set up regular game days to review and validate all procedures are effective and the teams are familiar with them. Anticipate failure. Perform pre-mortem exercises to identify potential sources of failure so they can be removed or mitigated. Test your failure scenarios and validate your understanding of their impact. Test your response procedures to ensure that they are effective and that teams are familiar with their execution. Set up regular game days to test workloads and team responses to simulated events. And the last design principle is to learn from all operational failures. Drive improvement through lessons learned from all operational events and failures. Share what is learned across teams and throughout the entire organization. The questions we're going to ask around the operational excellence include: how do you determine what your priorities are? How do you design your workload so you can understand its state? How do you reduce defects, ease remediation, and improve flow into production? How do you mitigate deployment risks? How do you know you are ready to support a workload? How do you understand the health of your workload? How do you understand the health of your operations? And how do you manage workload and operation events? And how do you evolve operations? At the end of the WellArchitected review, we will give you an improvement plan, which will identify high, medium, and low risk priorities. So, as this example here, we can see that there are 18 high-risk remediations and 13 medium-risk remediations across the pillars that should be implemented. Within each pillar, we'll see how many of the questions we've answered. We'll get question status of high risk, medium risk, and no identifieds. And we'll get a breakdown of each of the questions to see what it is that you can improve. To round off today's session, we're going to now look at AWS funding and what options are available to you. The following AWS programs are available to you through Silicon Overdrive as an AWS Advanced Consulting Partner. The first funding program is Partner Opportunity Acceleration, or POA funding. We can apply for AWS Partner Opportunity Acceleration funding to help accelerate a new workload opportunity. When applying for the funding, we generally apply for either consumption credits or partner cash. Consumption credits, also known as AWS usage credits, are used to offset the cost of AWS services and go straight to your AWS account. Partner cash is paid to Silicon Overdrive to offset the costs of our labor and is only applicable to migrations, and is only paid out after you complete a Customer Satisfaction Survey, or CSAT. If successful, you will be eligible for 10% of the estimated annual AWS spend in AWS usage credits or partner cache migration funding, based on the AWS pricing calculator. Next, we're going to look at the two Activate programs. The main benefit of both programs is that you can get started on AWS at zero cost, and you can get technical help during business hours. So getting started on AWS at zero cost. This allows Activate provides AWS credits valid for 2 years, so you can experiment and build nearly anything you can imagine. AWS credits are applied to AWS Build to help you cover costs associated with an eligible AWS service. And you can also get technical help during business hours. You will receive AWS developer support credits valid for 1 year that cover technical support via email during business hours, as well as general architectural guidance as you build and test. The first of the two programs is the Startup Activate Founders program. AWS Activate Founders is a free program open to self-funded and bootstrap startups that empowers you to innovate, build, and grow. You can get $1,000 in AWS usage credits and $350 in AWS developer support credits. To apply for Activate Founders, your startup must meet the following criteria. You must be new to AWS Activate Founders program, have not previously received credits from the AWS Activate portfolio. You must have an active AWS account. Your startup must be self-funded, unbacked or bootstrapped, with no institutional funding or affiliation with an Activate provider. You must have a company website or a web profile, and your startup must be less than 10 years old. The second program gives you the same benefits, but just more credits. And that's the Startup Activate portfolio. As a startup partner with an Activate funding organization, organization ID, Silicon Overdrive can assist startups access Startup Activate funding. If successful, you could be eligible for $5,000 in AWS usage credits valid for 2 years and $1,500 in AWS business support credits valid for 1 year. Depending on the size of your startup, we could apply, and startups have gotten up to $100,000 in usage credits. But this is the kind of a scenario that you'd want to talk directly to us about, and is dependent on how big your workloads are. The eligibility criteria for Activate portfolio is that your startup must be unfunded or funded up to and including pre-seed, angel, seed, debt finance, and Series A. You must have your Activate Providers Organization ID, so that's the Silicon Overdrive Activate Providers Organization ID. You must have a company website. The applicant must have a LinkedIn profile, and an AWS account needs to be active. You cannot previously received AWS Activate credits at equal or greater value from the same Activate provider. And you must not have exceeded $100,000 in redeemed AWS Activate credits. And again, your startup must be less than 10 years old. Next, we have Startup Migrate funding. As a startup partner, Silicon Overdrive can access Startup Migrate funding. If successful, as part of the program, you could be eligible for access to AWS usage credits to the value of 3 months of your expended spend, and partner cache migration funding to the value of 1 month's expected spend. Over and above this funding, you can also receive $5,000 in AWS business support credits based on the AWS pricing calculator. To be eligible for Startup Migrate funding, you must have a minimum spend of $2,000 a month. The next funding program ties into the WellArchitected review. As we mentioned, the WellArchitected review framework is based on 5 pillars of operational excellence, security, reliability, performance efficiency, and cost optimization. The framework provides a consistent approach to evaluate your workloads against AWS best practices and helps build secure, high-performing, resilient, scalable, and efficient infrastructure for your applications and workloads. AWS will provide customers $5,000 in AWS usage credits who leverage an approved AWS WellArchitected partner like Silicon Overdrive to improve a workload. There are also a certain percentage of remediations that need to be done after the WellArchitected review in order to be eligible for the funding. For more details on this, please do reach out to us after the webinar. The next funding option is the Windows Rapid Migration Program, or WRMP funding. As an Amazon EC2 for Microsoft Windows Service Delivery Partner, Silicon Overdrive can access the AWS Windows Rapid Migration Program funding. If your application is successful, as part of the program, you could be eligible for 25% of the estimated annual spend in AWS credits or partner cash migration funding based on the AWS pricing calculator. One of the things to bear in mind is that for the WRMP, at least 50% of your projected revenue must come from Windows workloads, and your minimum deal size should be $25,000 per annum. The final funding program that we're going to look at today is the Windows Modernization Program, or WMP funding. By offsetting APN partners' fees for both modernization discovery and replatforming, the AWS Windows Modernization Program helps customers modernize from monolithic commercial-grade platforms to cloud-native and open-source technology. Thank you for joining us today on this webinar. I do hope that you've learned at least something. If there are any further questions, please do reach out to us and we'll be able to answer all of those questions. Silicon Overdrive. Now just a quick little bit about Silicon Overdrive. With 25 years in the IT industry, our consultants offer expert advice on how to best utilize information technology to achieve your business objective, save costs, and enhance efficiency and productivity. Our technical assessments and IT audits help you make the best decision for your business. Our teams will evaluate your current environment for opportunities for improvement, standardization, cost optimization, and alignment with best practices and security standards. We offer flexible support options and comprehensive services from network cabling to security and compliance services. As a provider of fully managed IT services, we centrally manage your IT for you. Thank you again for your time, and please do let me know if there are any questions.